Let's talk about the next generation. With these retirees moving in and transitioning, one of their biggest concerns are their children and their grandchildren. And many times I get phone calls from clients saying, let's take X dollars amount out of our portfolio because my adult child wants a home, wants to, they feel guilty that their child does not have the same things that they had at their age, or they feel that obligation to support even though they're in retirement, and sometimes it's not financially the right thing to do. Walk me through how individuals are going through that sandwich generation, taking care of elderly parents and their adult children, or more the pressure of helping their adult child.
Boy, this is a tough one. We're going through it with my 27-year-old son,
Okay.
who has a great job, great career, and came in one day and said, well, I'm going to give it up now. I'm going to go back to school because I want to join the Coast Guard.
Okay.
Great. Well, what's that going to cost? Well, Dad, it's going to be probably $9,000. Well, do you have $9,000? Well, no. You know how you always said you would fund my education? Okay. So I'm looking at this going, well, yes, we did. And so we're going to fund his education. We're going to let him move in, which is a consideration in buying a boat, so that he can go and take this 3-month course so he can, qualify to join the Coast Guard. It's tough when you're dealing with your emotions, especially as you get older, because family becomes so important. And because family is important, and their approval of us and our ability to be able to help them is such a big part of our lives. It's why elder abuse becomes so big, because we always want to help somebody if they're our family member.
Mm-hmm.
It causes us to make some very bad decisions. So I think we have to lay down the law very early on what we're prepared to do once we get into this new phase of our life. And because if we don't, they think we have all sorts of money that we may not have, and that carefully laid plan you've got for the future becomes an issue. I'm not so worried about millennials, because millennials seem to be doing it more on their own. It's the Gen X's and the Gen X's really that are the problem, because they took all of our values and wanted to replicate our life, and now they're into their 40s. And so they still have financial issues that they figure their parents are going to bail them out of. And if you look at the statistics of numbers of adult children living at home in their 40s with their older parents, you find, well, maybe they were right. Maybe the parents are going to bail them out.
Yeah.
The millennials seem to be those people that they're not as into credit as the Gen Xers were, and certainly not what we were. And so they're taking a completely different view of their life. In fact, they don't want what we had. So in that reaction to it, I think they might be a little bit easier to deal with. But your challenge, I think, is why would they have to go to a financial advisor to get that? Why can't they just go online, which is what a lot of them are doing? I have a way around that, by the way, because it's not so much you as a financial advisor that they need to see, but you as a coach that they need to talk to.
Yeah.
And so your role will change with that group. As far as dealing with older parents, we're dealing with issues such as caregiving. My mother lives in Calgary, and my mother, we're here for her 87th birthday. The whole family is together. The whole family doesn't get together that often. My mother has the first stages of dementia. We have to keep telling her that the whole family is coming, and she'll remember it today, but she won't remember it tomorrow. So we figure, all right, this is the last time. We already have power of attorney, which I believe that everybody from my age on up should have a power of attorney in place to act for us when we can't act.
Absolutely.
Right? So we've got that in place for her. My younger brother looks after her here. She's in a facility. Well, God, don't call it a facility. She's in a home, a residence.
Yep.
And she's getting great care, so we don't have to worry about her. But as we look at her financial situation, we realize that she made the same dumb mistakes that we all made. and that, you know, she has a reverse mortgage now that we're trying to unwind, but you can't unwind it until you sell the condo. The condo that she lived in, she's lived in it for 30 years, and it's worth 30 years of dirt and grime and mouse droppings and ugh. And we got to sell this thing in order to look after it. So there are all these issues that people in my generation don't tend to address as far as older people. To look at what are the things we should be thinking about, because inevitably we're going to have to deal with it.
Do you find that people are concerned or worried about judgment on them, or how other people will look at them? And what I mean by that is, if your adult child is not successful, does not have their own home, does not have a car or a nice job, or what we've considered to be socially acceptable as success in our society, then you're looked at bad upon, or you're looked at in a negative light. And same with your parents. If you're not caring for them, if they're not in a situation where you're supporting them, then you're looked like the ungrateful child who's in retirement enjoying. Like, do you see judgment happening on both sides here?
Yeah, not as much on the ungrateful child part, because in Far East cultures, you're expected
Correct.
to look after your parents.
Yeah.
So here it's assumed that you do, although what I find is a lot of adult children don't.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of like, well, I'm doing okay, you're on your own. So there's that issue. I think that we can't be so concerned about how other people view us either. That if you live in a home that isn't as big as everybody else's home, that this now means that we should put the hair shirt on ourselves again and feel bad for a life that was wasted. Mm-hmm. It's so much that we're judged by what other people think, and the boomers are going through this right now in wanting to have the kind of flashy retirement where everybody will say, gee, he was a success in business. Boy, is he ever a success. What happens if you want to just wind it down and enjoy walks on the beach? Are you going for a walk on the beach because you can't afford to go to Palm Springs? Well, I guess that must be the case.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case. I happen to like walks on the beach. So it's an issue you have to fight through, because people will judge your retirement, and they will look at you, and your retirement, the kind of retirement you have, is very much an indication of how successful a human being you are. But you see, the judgment of how successful a human being you are comes from you having the kind of retirement I would like.
Yeah.
Right? Not the kind of retirement that you've actually settled into and have thought about.
I find that's the case where people are being judged based upon what they envision others should have based upon their own views, not what the individual wants. But that's a very good point. There's concerns about taking care of your children, your parents, while individuals are going through their own health concerns. How important is health when it comes to people who are transitioning to retirement? Because anecdotally, we ask people once a month at our seminars, what are the biggest risks do you find in retirement? And health does come up. It's either in the top 3 or 4. Is that empirically what you're finding in your research? And how are people concerned about healthcare in retirement?
Yeah, and it's not just the big healthcare issues, whether it be cardiovascular, diabetes, the things that people go through that are the big cancers, right? It's the small things. It's the things that are annoying, chronic conditions that start to come in. So we know right now in Canada that about 70% of Canadians over age 70 have 2 or more chronic conditions. So these are things that get in the way of life enjoyment, where you can't walk because you've had continual gout all your life, or you've got a bum ankle that just keeps getting worse. The big one I find is back issues, mm-hmm. which have become chronic. And so this idea, I'm going to play a lot of golf in retirement, all of a sudden you can't even move. So that's an issue. The health is really, really important. It is, you look at it and you go, all right, what's going to get in the way of this and in the way of the kind of life that I want? I look at my own case. Right now, the thing that is in the way of what I want is the fact that I'm carrying more weight than I need to. So there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about this and do what I can. But I also am very familiar with cancer and understand that that's hanging over my head. So you look at that and say, all right, you got to live each day to its fullest. And the two go to cross purposes, because if I'm going to live each day to its fullest, where does exercise fit into that? It is a discussion that I have with myself, and part of the own enlightening process. I think everybody has to have that. Has to look and say, what do I really want, and how can I continue to feel as good as I can to be able to get it? And that's one of the keys to this becoming enlightened. That I see.
What do you think about people saying that they're not going to live as long? We're seeing longevity happen. It's a fact. People are living longer than ever before in history. Yet, time and time again, when we're doing retirement planning or we're talking about longevity, oh, I'm not going to live that long. And they just have that mindset that longevity doesn't impact them whatsoever.
Yeah, there's a well-known commercial on TV where people are asked to estimate their longevity, and they continue to underestimate their longevity. When you look at the statistics of a couple and who is likely to still be alive after age 90, I think the number in Canada now, there's an 11% chance that one of you will still be alive after age 90. After age 80, the number's over 50% that one of you is going to be alive. So when you look at numbers of what are the chances that we're going to have to plan for 90 or 100, they're staggering. They really are. And yet people say, well, the old 4-score-and-10, and by the time I get into my 70s, I'm old. Funny thing with that is you get age 65, age 70, you start to call yourself old. You're getting a pension check, so that makes you old. You've got the gray hair. You are into this retirement phase, and so you're now finding yourself accepting seniors' discounts and sitting in the spots on the bus for seniors, and now you make yourself old. The enlightened person doesn't tend to do that, but I think that we can fit ourselves into this box that says I'm old, I don't have much time left, and whatever I have, it's not going to be anything but moving slowly towards death. And I think we have to look at this in a different way. Now, granted, as we get older, when you get to be 65, there is more likelihood that you are going to get sick, which gets back to this idea you and I have talked about. You got to live every day like it's your last, because it may be. But this idea that you make yourself old is, I think, a bigger idea or a bigger threat to your longevity than anything else.
We've seen the healthcare system across Canada change over the last few decades. The concern that's out there is that the healthcare system will not be able to afford the same kind of programs today in the future. And so, in my opinion, I believe that one of two things are going to happen. Either governments will remove services from the system, or number two, they might privatize some of those services. And either way, if you want to have a service, it's going to come out of your pocket. And do you find that Canadians are thinking about that or prepared about the financial impacts and the emotional impacts of aging and the healthcare system?
I think that they are, but something that's getting in the way currently is we're all patting ourselves on the back because we're not in the United States. Having said that, I think you're going to move towards some kind of mix between what governments will provide and what we're going to have to provide for ourselves. I totally agree with you. This is going to be a societal issue that we will have to face because all the boomers are getting older together, and our demands on the healthcare system will be such that governments will not be able to afford it. So when you look at what they're going to have to pay out as far as pensions go and as far as healthcare, where's the money all going to come from? So I think that there will be means testing. We're going to have to find ways to look after a lot of those basic services ourselves. Which I think it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. I don't mind if putting plans in place to pay for it myself. I don't expect I'll have to do what I have to do in the United States, because there's other reasons it's so expensive down there.
Correct.
But I got to look after myself. So as I going forward, I can't just, expect to depend on BC healthcare, for example, or in Medicare in general.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. One of the conversations that come up quite a bit in our practice is passing on assets upon death. We call it the legacy bucket.